couple of principles that this workshop's all about. One is that healing and growth take process. They take time. They take our ability to take ownership and awareness of what we need to do and dive into it and do it differently. Also, it takes relationships. Healing happens in the context of relationship. And tonight I want to talk more about both of those processes, but I really want to start with a foundation of the whole marital restoration workshop, and that restoration and healing and growth in marriages is God's idea. This is God's idea. At the top of the teaching there is one of my favorite verses. It's a verse that, it's one of the statements of Jesus when he was confronted by some of the theologians of his day. And they asked him, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. In other words, to love God with everything you got, and to love others as we're able to love ourselves. I think that's foundational. I think that's what life is all about. And that starts all the way back in Genesis, and today I want to take us a little journey from Genesis, especially Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3, which I think kind of summarize the whole of the Bible in those first three chapters. I want to touch a little bit about that. But a little picture that starts with God, and it's a picture that I got from. Those of you who are Willow attenders will recognize this picture. Is something that John Ortberg has shown about what God is like, and he draws three little stick figures. This is God in the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and they are in a relationship. They're in a relationship. Connecting with each other, loving each other. The Trinity is in community. They're in a house of love. And out of that love, out of that relationship, God created. You think in terms, out of that relationship, God created. He created everything there was in the universe, and the crown of his creation was man and woman. He created them male and female. He said, let us make man in our own image. And he made them male and female. We were created to reflect God. In his image we were created. As male and female, that's something special. When he looked at what he created, he said, that's very good. We are the crown of his creation. We were created to reflect him and invited into relationship with him. We were invited into that relationship of love. That's what you and I were created for, to be in relationship with God and to reflect God. To truly think of ourselves as really okay, special in his eyes. Can you think of yourselves as special people, men and women created in God's image? Secondly, we were created to be in relationship with each other. Relationship with each other. The only thing in all of creation that God said was not good was when man was by himself. When he was alone. That was not okay. That was not okay. So he brought a helper suitable for him. He created woman, not from his head to be above, not from his feet to be below, but from his rib to be alongside. And out of that relationship, out of that love relationship between man and woman, he said, rule together. Rule together. Be fruitful and multiply. He said, be naked and unashamed. Just think, out of that connectedness, out of that relationship, came fruitfulness, came ecstasy. It was life, and life at its fullest. That was God's design. He created us to be in a house of love, able to love, able to be fruitful, able to live life free and passionate. Can you imagine that a little bit? Can you imagine yourselves as free? Can you imagine yourselves as not ashamed? The picture I think of is of bowls. We are bowls or vessels or cups. Beautiful cups God created. And He fills us with His love so that we're overflowing. We're able to love Him back, and we're able to love others. We just spill out all over. That's what we were created to be. That's what marriage is all about. At the end of chapter 2, God says, and they were naked and not ashamed. But that's not the end of the story. As vessels, Adam and Eve became broken. It's real interesting. God gave them the whole freedom for to eat of anything in the garden, and there were 2 trees that He especially identified. One was the tree of life, and that was one of the trees they could eat of. The other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the result, if they were to eat of that tree, would be death. In essence, God encouraged them to choose life. But what happened? Satan came to them and said, did God really say that you would die? Did He really say that? Is that what eating of that tree will really result in? No, but you know what? You'll be more wise. You'll be like God. Here we were, here Adam and Eve, created in the image of God, and the temptation was to be God. That's what Satan was all about, the attempt to be God, and he encouraged Adam and Eve to go for it as well. And what happened? They looked at that fruit and they said, wow, this looks good to eat. Wow, this looks beautiful to look at, and guess what? This fruit will make us wise. So what did they do? They went their own way rather than God's way. They ate of the fruit. Their own desires they went after. The grass was greener on the other side, and they went after it. And what happened? Broken. They were broken cups. Broken vessels. Top of the next page. What happened? They no longer reflected God. It's kind of like a house of mirrors. You ever walked into a house of mirrors and you get a skewed reflection? Well, that's what happened. They were no longer an accurate reflection of God, but a skewed reflection. And what happens when you're broken? Think in terms of how do you respond? If you're broken, you're afraid. You're afraid of what? You're afraid that someone will see you broken and will reject you. And that's what happened to Adam and Eve. They hid. They covered themselves. They were broken of themselves. They covered themselves. They hid from God. They hid from each other. They were broken people. And no longer did they live in a house of fear. No longer, rather, did they live in a house of love, but they lived in a house of fear. No longer was there freedom. No longer was there ecstasy. But there was fear. There was shame. They needed to cover themselves as a result. They were broken. Broken in their relationship with God. Broken in their reflection of God. Broken in their relationship with each other. So what happened? Here they are broken. Here they are hiding. Their first move is to protect themselves. They covered themselves. First defenses. And when God came to see what had happened, to ask them what's going on, what did they do? They protected some more. They said, but Adam said, what did he say? Eve made me do it. Right? And what did Eve say? The devil made me do it. Immediately, they went to protecting. They went to defensiveness. They didn't own it. They didn't acknowledge their part, did what was natural to them, and that is to blame others. Also, as a part of their fall, as a part of their brokenness, came the curse to their relationship. Their relationship was cursed. Interesting verse in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. God said to the woman, "Your desire will be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Your desire will be for your husband. Interesting word, the word desire. It's the same word that in the next chapter is a word about Satan. When Satan was desiring to overwhelm and to engulf Cain. That's the kind of desire. Remember, this is about the curse. This verse is found in the curse. So my sense is this desire is an overwhelming desire. A smothering kind of desire. Not a healthy, helpful desire. And my guess, some of you men can relate to that. You feel overwhelmed sometime by your spouse, by your wife. That overwhelming sense of controlling kind of desire. Second part of the verse. He will rule over you. No longer are they ruling together, being fruitful together in their work, but he will rule over her. And my guess, a lot of you wives, that's how you experience your husband, is him ruling over you, controlling over you. Whatever and however you do it, there's struggle and brokenness in your relationship as a result of the fall. We are broken people, and we stay broken people. In fact, as a result of Adam and Eve's fall, we're born into this world broken people. The scripture says, "Sin and brokenness entered the world through one man, Adam, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all." We're all broken. We come into the world broken, fragile creatures, and we are broken by others. What I want you to reflect on just a little bit, a few minutes, is your family of origin. Are you aware of how you were broken in your family of origin? No matter how great a family you grew up in, no matter how wonderful, your parents were broken people. They could only love conditionally. They weren't able to love the way God loves us. There wasn't that pure love, sacrificial love. It was skewed. It was broken. So you were hurt. Now, I use a couple words in the handout here. I think we were either or both abused and abandoned. Now, those are strong words. But are you in touch with how you were either abused or abandoned growing up in your family of origin? By family or friends, siblings? For example, emotionally. When I think of it, when I think of the abuse part, I think of the words you were called, the names you were called. You're stupid. You'll never amount to much. Those are hurtful, crushing words. Or maybe you were on the other end of that, and you were abandoned. You didn't hear positive words. You didn't hear, "I love you." You didn't hear, "I'm proud of you." You're special. You didn't hear those valuing types of words. I mean, I grew up in a family, it was a missionary family. My parents, if anybody would grow up in a wonderful family, you would think I grew up in a wonderful family. They were Christians, missionaries overseas. But I know growing up, I don't remember hearing the words, "I love you." I don't remember those words until after I graduated from college. And I said those words to my parents. And guess what? They said them back to me. That's a long time, at least not to remember hearing those words. How about you? Did you hear those words growing up? How about physically? On one hand is the abuse, the hitting. The other is the absence of hugs. Do you remember getting hugged growing up? Did you grow up in a family where you were embraced and you knew you were loved without a shadow of a doubt? Because those "I love you" were there and the hugs were there. Is that you? Or did you grow up with an absence of that? Again, that's something that I grew up without. I didn't get a lot of hugs. Now, one of the things that happened to me is at first grade, I went off to boarding school. So boarding school, through grade school, I went off and I had guardians, and so there was a lot of separation from my parents. So a lot of things that maybe would have happened didn't happen. But part of my struggle is dealing with not having those kinds of things in my life. That's difficult. It's hard to feel good about myself if I don't hear those words, if I don't experience those hugs. Can you relate to that? How about sexually? Being abused, being hurt sexually, not having boundaries, not able to have privacy in your house growing up. That's abusive. Or how about the abandoning side? Not being told anything about sex growing up. I mean, that's real common, not hearing anything about it. And we end up having to learn about sex ourselves in the locker room from our friends. Pretty skewed perspectives. And then there's spiritual brokenness as well. Being abandoned, being abused spiritually. What kind of God did you hear about growing up? A hurtful, harmful God? An absent God? How were you broken in your family of origin? Okay. Next, we stay broken. We stay broken. We stay broken by the ways we cope. God offered Adam and Eve life or death. They chose death. We often choose death. Sometimes we don't know any better. Sometimes it's a survival mechanism, but we keep it going. One of the things, for example, how I learned to cope was by figuring out very quickly, in fact, for me, I think in terms of I figured this out in first grade, that I couldn't count on anybody. I would not be able to count on anybody. Therefore, I could only count on myself. And I became very independent as a result, trusted myself, didn't trust anybody else, and I carried that through my life. I thought that was a pretty good deal. I did well. But that's not God's design for me. God created me for relationship, for community. He was inviting me into that circle of love. And I didn't go there because I saw God as an abandoning God. He wouldn't be there just like my parents wouldn't be there, just like others would be there. So why would I trust that? How about you? How did you keep the pain going? By trying to cope, trying to handle it, but it not working in relationship. One of the verses that I have down here is how God spoke to the children of Israel through the prophet Jeremiah and said, you've committed two sins. One, you've forsaken me, the spring of living water. Two, you've dug your own cisterns or wells. Those are leaky wells that don't hold any water. God didn't condemn or judge them because they were needy people, because they were thirsty people. He just had a problem with how they did it, how they went about quenching their thirst. And that's where we stay broken. We have a problem with how we quench our thirst. We do it through ways that are not healthy and not appropriate ways. We dig our own wells. We protect ourselves. One of the things I think about in terms of a defense is what's helpful to me to picture as an overcoat. It's a protective thing, isn't it? Most of you tonight wore overcoats in here because it's cold outside. That worked for you, okay? That works. What if it were 90 degrees outside in the middle of the summer and you come in with an overcoat and you don't take it off? It's not working for you. That defense isn't working for you. But that's what we tend to do because we learn about how to protect ourselves. This is what I did. I learned to be independent, so guess what? I'm going to stay independent. And then I get married. And you think that helps my marriage? No, it didn't help my marriage at all to be so independent. But I hung on to that. And that was something that was painful and destructive in my marriage and something that we needed to work on in our marriage. One other point, and it's not on there, and I'd love for you to just write this down, point D, and that is we pass on our destructiveness to others. We pass that on. We hurt others. We want to do it right, but we don't. This is huge, and the biggest picture where I have this the most is with my son. I have a 17-year-old son. Guess what's hard for me to do if I grew up not hearing the words, I love you? It's hard for me to say the words, I love you. Do I want my son to grow up not hearing those words? Do I want him to grow up like me? No way, no way. But you know what? Sometimes I have to grit my teeth and go in. Probably doesn't seem real congruent. I love you, But I've been working at it, and I'm better. But that's the natural knee-jerk reflex for me, that's what I pass on. If my dad was out working all the time, and I hardly ever saw him, what's easy for me to do? Be out working all the time. I just pass that on. That's natural. That's what I learned. Where it's really scary is that's what we pass on. We pass on those kinds of parts to those we love. I like how Paul wrestles with this issue in Romans 7. He goes, I want to do things, but what I want to do, I don't do. There's other things I don't want to do, and guess what? I do those things. His conclusion, what a wretched man I am. Who will save me from this? Okay? I think that's where we are. When we think in terms of our brokenness, we are hurting people. We don't want to pass those on. Paul's next phrase is, thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. That's how we can do it differently. That's what gives us hope. On top of the next page, but we need help to be restored. We need that hope. God stayed with Adam and Eve. Fascinating verse in Scripture where he covered their sins. He covered their bodies. He made the first sacrifice, animal sacrifice, and he used that to cover their bodies, and he set in place a whole system of sacrifice that allowed man and woman to kind of come back into that community. He reached out ultimately and sent his son Jesus to die for us that we might be restored. And that's what our process is all about, the restoration process, the redeeming process. That God can indeed take our brokenness, mend our brokenness, and we can be restored. And that's what marital restoration is all about. You're here, you're broken, and you want to do it differently. I think a key piece in that is a verse, and again, back in Genesis, where God talks about marriage as a process of leaving family of origin, cleaving to our spouse, and becoming one flesh. And I believe the challenge that we all face is the challenge to leave. Sure, we leave, we leave our family, but guess what? We bring our junk with us into our new relationship. And I really believe that in order to cleave healthily, we really need to leave and work on our own stuff. Leave our stuff behind. And a key to this process, I believe, is getting in touch with our feelings. We'll talk more about feelings. But our feelings help us get in touch with our needs. Have an acronym here that I'd like you to take a look at. Sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender. Sachet. Good way to remember feelings. What are you feeling? Sad, angry, scared? Happy, excited, tender. For a lot of us, we struggle with this area. My guess you have some of those feelings that are easier for you to express, some of that are more difficult. What's the difficult feeling for you to share, to talk about, to put out there? Our feelings help us tap our needs. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." What happens if you don't mourn? What happens if you're sad and you don't tell anybody? You're not going to be comforted. You're not going to get your real needs met. But for many of us, we weren't allowed to feel. Don't feel. Maybe you grew up. Don't feel. For me, the hardest feeling for me to get in touch with and share is scared. It was not okay for me to be afraid. Not okay. I had to survive. I couldn't count on others, so I just couldn't be afraid. But was I scared going off to boarding school in first grade? You bet. That was a scary place to be. But I couldn't go there. Okay, so I bury that. I push that down, and I rise above it somehow. I cope somehow. Our scare helps us, but if I felt scared, maybe I could get those needs met. I could be my insecurity needs, my needs for belonging, my needs for affirmation. They could be met if I let myself be afraid. Okay. How How about you? What's difficult for you? It's important to realize I have that feelings are layered. And for example, down near the bottom of that page there is anger, sad, and scare. That's one constellation. That's the constellation that I began to realize that how I feel. Is that, and it took a while because for a while I wasn't feeling, I felt fine. You ask me how I feel? Fine. Or if I change that, I'd say tired. Okay? Fine or tired, two negative feelings, or positive and negative. I mean, that's pretty boring. And how am I really feeling is what I began to tell myself. But I began to be aware that I was angry. And that was a huge first step, to be able to be aware that I was angry, that I'm an angry person. Once I got there, I could go underneath what was underneath that anger. And it finally led to hurt and scare. I could begin to get in touch with that scare. But that's how I do it. I do anger first. Does it make sense to you why if a scared person might be angry? If I'm scared, insecure, it gives me power. I feel strong when I'm angry. I look strong. I scare people away. It protects self-protection. That's how I do it. Some of you do it that way as well. Others of you do it the other way around. You start with hurt and sadness. You're real in touch with that. And underneath that might be the anger and scare. And that's how you do it. And for some of you, you're not in touch with that angry feeling. And as a result, you're not able to protect yourself and you stay getting hurt. And then you need to be able to be angry. You need to be able to acknowledge, be able to say no, draw some boundaries. We're going to have a teacher come in a couple of weeks talk about boundaries. But maybe that's how you do it. And guess what? There's a good chance if you start with angry, you probably marry someone that does it differently than you. I did. My wife is in touch with her hurt, her pain. And guess what happens when I get angry? She feels hurt. And we struggle. What if I were to share my scare instead of my anger? It's a huge difference. But if I'm not in touch with my scare, I lead with my anger, and she'll feel hurt. And that's the kind of dance that we get ourselves into. And we've really had to work and struggle through that. The challenge is for us to be aware of our feelings so we can get aware of our needs. And the next one is how to get in touch with how we cope. How do we do it differently? I'm going to turn the page, and there's a diagram there that I want us to run through real quickly here. If you see yourself, we have needs for relationship. We come to life needing love, acceptance, belonging. We all have these needs coming in. But what happens is we experience the abuse, abandonment, and our needs get blocked. Our needs get blocked. We don't get what we need. So we cope as best we can. And I think we tend to do it two different ways. One, we tend to stay blocked. We try to go around this block. And we block our needs ourselves, and we don't get in touch with them. So we don't get our needs really met. And how we tend to do it is internally and externally. Internal way is the messages we have in our head. And those are the messages: don't feel, don't be afraid, or messages that said you're stupid, you'll never amount to anything, those negative messages. So what happens when I come up to a situation where that I'd be afraid? Immediately that comes into my mind. Don't be afraid. Don't go there. So I don't go there. Okay. And I do this with others. I do this externally. And this happens when someone else is afraid. When someone else is afraid, guess what my knee-jerk response is? Don't be afraid. When my son, who's 17 now, went to kindergarten and was scared about going to kindergarten, do you know what I said? Don't be afraid. It'll be okay. Because I didn't want to go there either. Imagine if we're both scared and I haven't dealt with my scare. Oh, we're in big trouble. A puddle on the floor for both of us. I go, oh, don't go there. Everything's going to be okay. When my wife gets scared, don't go there. So here she is wanting to tell me her fear, her hurt, her pain, and I just go, oh, don't go there. See, I keep myself blocked by not going there. Or I will think that she won't like me scared. I remember thinking she needed me strong. That's what she wanted, a strong husband. So if I was scared, guess what? She wouldn't be okay with that, would she? See, and I keep myself stuck there. And are you aware of keeping yourself stuck by the messages you tell yourself? Don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. Because if you do, something bad's going to happen. So you don't work through it. You don't work through that block. You kind of try to go around it. Or you try to rise above it. This is where we put on our masks, rising above it. We make our sin, we make our brokenness into a virtue. Can you relate to that? For example, for me, I was sharing this with my wife today because I was saying I was going to tell some of our story, and she wanted to know what I was going to tell about her. See? And so I said, well, I'm going to talk about this, and how we make this into a virtue, and how some of us will isolate ourselves. And she goes, that's what you do. I go, yeah, okay. I mean, it's hard when someone else points out what you do. I'd like to be able to say, this is what I do, rather than be told what I do. But that's what I do. I pull away, I isolate, and guess what? I make it a virtue. I kind of make myself superior. See, I don't need you kind of a thing. And so it's a protective mask that I wear. Can any of you relate? You pull yourself away. You're superior, you're intellectual. You've got the right answers, you're right. And you can keep other people at a distance because they're wrong. Or, and I was quick to point out to my wife, you move towards others. She moves towards others. People pleaser. You're nice. You're loving. You're caring. You're smothering. You're manipulating. No, don't go there. But that's the mask you wear. That's the mask you put on. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you're created. It's like you try something out in order to receive. If I'm nice to you, you'll be nice to me. And it doesn't work. So again, we don't get our needs met, even though, sometimes some of us make careers out of it, like counselors, Careers out of being nice, trying to get their, and that sounds sick. I remember I worked at Trinity for a while, and seminarians, I'd say, why are you coming to seminary? You're just coming to get your needs met, aren't you? No. But boy, when someone else realized that, they got in touch with that sense of, yeah, I'm doing this so I'll feel good, so that people will like me. All of a sudden it's like, wow, is that why I'm in the ministry? That's kind of yucky. Well, see, that's what's important, to be able to be aware that our masks are kind of yucky. Or we move against people. Move against people. Macho. There's a part of that in me. To move against. Again, if I move against, it feels strong, it feels powerful. It's a mask I wear. People say it's great. Wall Street, that's what Wall Street's all about, winning. I grew up playing football. That's what it was about, winning. Winning over others. Yet it didn't meet my needs emotionally. My needs for love, my needs for acceptance, my need for connectedness. None of this stuff works. None of our masks work. So, what do we end up doing? And I believe we all do this. We move to things. I personally think we are all addicts. We're all addicts. Can you name your addiction? Can you name your addiction? Is it food? Do you go to the refrigerator when you get stressed out? Do you turn on the TV when you get stressed out? Do you use sex when you get stressed out? Do you use drugs when you get stressed out? Do you work when you get stressed out? Do you get on the computer when you're stressed out? What do you use? It's kind of nice to sit back and watch TV sometimes, but not if it's an escape from a relationship with my wife. See, that's what life is about, connectedness and relationship. But boy, when I get stressed out, boy, I know some of you sports addicts really got a hit this weekend with the XFL coming on. Boy, more football, And your spouse says, you're addicted. My wife told me that. I was addicted to sports. I said, no, I'm not. Well, she said, okay, don't watch any football on Sunday for the next few weeks. I went into withdrawal. That's what you do. You find out what you're addicted at by stop doing what you're addicted to and see what happens. But we move to things. Those are idols. Those don't work. So what happens, we stay stuck here. We stay stuck. This is the stuff we're trying to leave, but guess what? We don't leave it. We bring that into our marriage. We bring that into our marriage, and that's what I want to just real quickly talk about, the ABCs of marriage. We bring our masks into marriage, and that's what we see. That's what we see. Boy, the wonders of romance. Do you remember those days? They say that romance lasts from 6 months to 2 years. It's the anesthetic. I brought my laid-back, cool mask into relationship with my wife, Cheryl. She brought her people-pleasing mask into her relationship with me. Guess what I discovered? I found someone who would love me, who would call me wonderful. You know, I mean, I was the greatest thing to come along. Boy, was that great. And guess what? She would never abandon me. That's what she showed me with her mask. You know, and I showed her that I was laid back, calm, cool, and she, you know, that I'd love her. And we had some wonderful dances with our masks on. Dancing away. Oh, that was great. Till we got married. Didn't take long for that plug to get pulled. There went the anesthesia. Now, I married an independent woman who has a mind of her own, who makes her own decisions. What happens to me when I marry someone who has their own mind and she just doesn't stroke my ego all the time? What's happening to me? What gets triggered in me? Abandonment. Abandonment. Man, I didn't know I was going to get abandoned by her. I married her so I wouldn't get abandoned. But I married someone like her. Okay, now take this one step further. When I feel abandoned, what am I feeling? Scared. What do I do with my scare? Anger. Okay. What happens when I married a woman who feels hurt by anger? Okay? She's been in a context where she's been hurt before. What does she do? What do you think she does when I get angry? Pulls away. Now what am I feeling? Abandoned even more. I'm in big trouble. I thought I married someone who would always be there, who would, you know, I wouldn't be abandoned by, and here I discover I'm getting abandoned in my relationship. Oh man, that's trouble. And what we get into is another kind of a dance. It's really a weird dance. And I love this picture. I went to a Harville Hendricks workshop one time, and he talked about hailing and turtle, being a turtle and being a hailstorm. Now, if I'm not being understood, my natural response is to hail, right? Do you ever do that? You get louder? I'm just going, don't you get it? And I get louder, and she doesn't get it, and so I get louder again. Man, that's really crazy when you step back and think about it. Because what does she do? There, tucks back under her shell. And I think, well, if I hail louder, she'll come out, right? So I try it louder, and you know, just she hunkers down, and you know, I got to stop hailing in order for her to come out. And we switch roles. Sometimes she'll hail away at me, and I'll go, I'm out of here. You know, I got to wait till, you know, I got to poke my head out to see if it's safe to come out. And it's that we have that dance. Do you see yourself doing that thing? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. One of the things we did, though, we've been married almost 25 years. We stuck it out. And I really have come to believe that that's a good place for us to be. You know, we need to thank our spouses for being such a pain. Do you ever do that? Boy, thank you, husband, wife, for being such a pain. Because you create a context for me to work on my junk. You know? Here I get to work my abandonment issues out. And we grow as a result. But that commitment that we stay together, that's really huge. and we learn to do it differently. We learn to do a dance differently. And the key to doing it differently is bringing my truth into relationship. I'll never forget the first time that I brought my scare into my relationship with my wife was when I was angry at her. And I walked out the door to go to work. I slammed the door and started walking to my car, and I stopped. And I asked myself, why am I so angry? What's this about? It was no big deal. I can't even remember what the deal was. But I remember stopping and asked myself, what's this about for me that I'm so mad? Clicked. I'm scared. That's what I really am. Now, do I dare go back inside and tell her I'm really scared? Man, that's a scary place to be. You know, she could just, boom, boom, you know, I'm vulnerable. I decided to do that. I walked back inside and said, you know, what's really going on for me is I'm feeling afraid. Huh. What did she do? She came up to me, put her arms around me. Oh, she listened to me. She met my needs. I walked out the door, and my day was a completely different day. I know what I usually do. I slam the door, I'm angry. My whole day is rotten. I walked out the door, and I go, whoa, did that feel good? That was huge for me. Now, do I automatically go back to that all the time? Scared? Oh, yeah. You know, is it easy? No. But it's like I'm aware, and I'm in process, and I'm trying to do it differently. But it's for me to bring my truth, not my wife's truth. It's to bring my truth into relationship. God invites that, you know, that picture, that unity picture. He invites us into that relationship with Him. So I need to be acknowledge, aware of my truth, give that to God, okay? That's where healing's going to happen, to give it to Him. And He's going to embrace it. He's not going to judge me. Secondly, and this is the toughest part, and some of you are already experiencing the difficulty of this, and that is to bring my brokenness into relationship. To bring my brokenness into the small groups that you're in. Can I do that? Can I share my truth, my pain into that, and trust that I might receive grace, I might receive love, and that I can get healed? The third step is even more difficult, and that is, can I bring my truth into my relationship with my wife? Again, it's my truth. Bring me into that. Not point the truth, not point at her truth, but my truth. You know, can I do that? Whether you're here together as a couple, can each of you do that? Or whether you're here by yourself, to learn to become truthful about ourselves. And to bring that truth into God's love, others' love, and experience healing. There's where that small group is again. That's where healing's going to happen for each one of us here tonight. Where are you at tonight? Let me ask you a question. How are you feeling right now? How are you feeling? What are you feeling? Are you feeling sad because you've been hurt? You feeling angry? Your heart's hard? You feeling scared? Where are you at with those feelings? Could you share that with your small group? Could you share that tonight? Can you begin to enter into that? Even though that's scary, even though that's risky. I want to encourage you to do that as you enter into your small groups tonight.